talk. My name is Aljamal Rashad Bynum. I'm the chairman of MORE, Movement Omaha for Race Equity. And we have a special show for you today. Also, we have the treasurer of the board, Karen Abrams, who's also one of the co-founders, and we've been around for about 10 years. Just a little backdrop, and Karen's going to say a little about herself. But it started about 10 years ago in the home of Jack Dunn. He's one of the co-founders. And so we've been involved as a number of years with Progress Research Omaha, and then we later changed the name to MORE. And so that's just a little backdrop on MORE. And I'm going to let Karen introduce herself when we get going into a little bit more. And Karen, you may want to add a little bit more to the introduction about MORE.
Yeah, so we've been around since what, 2009, 2010 in various permutations, and it was 2020 that we decided we really wanted to be explicitly anti-racist in our name and in our mission statement. And we are proud that we can say that we're an organization that has anti-racism in our mission statement. And what we're not as proud of is that we think we might be the only ones in Nebraska. It seems that way. As of today, we haven't had anybody counter us on that claim, despite making it for a number of years. So yeah, and we've been working together for all that time, also in various ways. And Ajmal and I are going to just have like a casual conversation, and then we'll open it up for some of your observations from folks who are in the audience.
Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to have a series of questions, Karen and I, back and forth to talk about some of our experience, but also racism. And I will say there are very few people who can talk about it. Again, we see the decline of DEI programs, and some of them were useless to start with because they didn't deal with some of the very issues that we talk about: racism, disparities, accountability, and transparency. And so we're going to kind of set a model upon ourselves. We disagree on some issues, we agree on some, but one of the things we really appreciate is that kind of a concept where we can banter and talk about issues and help us respectively grow and learning from other people who have different viewpoints. So I want to start off and say this. I've been knowing Karen. She's a Jewish person who is what we call an atheistic Jew. And I learned a lot about that from her. I thought all Jewish people were religious, like I thought all Christians were religious. And I am an atheist, a born again atheist. I like to carry that proud. And so one of the first questions I want to ask her is, many people are not familiar with an atheistic Jew and some of the issues that you face. And my question is, share more what the concept means, and also being a bad Jew in terms of your identity, because I never heard of the word bad Jew either. So Karen, talk a little bit about that.
Well, bad Jew is kind of something that I made up about myself as a self-deprecating remark, but something that a lot of people don't realize, especially in the Midwest, is that being Jewish is really an ancestry, and it's a culture, and it's an ethnicity, and a religion. I think in the United States, of the millions of Jews in the United States, about 30% of us diasporic Jews who currently live in this country are not religious. So for me, it's really more about my ancestry. I am the child of a Holocaust survivor. My mother was Belgian and had to go into hiding as a small child during World War II. But the ancestry piece is that I am from a sort of small subset of Jews called Ashkenazi Jews, who are from the parts of Central and Eastern Europe primarily. And for me, that's Hungary and Poland, or what's now Hungary and Poland. And if you look at my genes, 99% of my genes hail from this Ashkenazi group. So that's really, I think, answers your question in terms of that ancestry and that culture piece. And when I would say that I am a bad Jew, really, I was referencing the fact that I'm not a religious person. I've been to synagogue for various events related to weddings and bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, which are coming of age ceremonies for young religious Jews. So I've never really celebrated the religious part of my ethnicity and my ancestry. Do you have any follow-up question on that?
No, I'm good. I understand what you just said. It makes sense.
So in terms of, kind of put it back to you in terms of culture, one of the things that I always noticed about you is that you've been willing to work alongside white people like me and the rest of the couple of other white people that we've got at Moore to on anti-racism issues. And I wanted to ask you, what are the potential benefits and the certain perils of working with white people on the anti-racism agenda, and how do you handle those perils?
Well, number one, I would start off as an African American who comes from a very Afrocentric perspective and who's pure African in a sense, not in terms of genetic makeup, but also thought. It is a challenge to work with white folks. I do have 7 white friends. I try to treat them respectfully. Can't have more than that. But every now and then, one of the things that challenges me is that all my white friends at some point resort back to their racism or their whiteness sometime. And again, there are very few John Browns out there. And I say that some people may get offended by that. It's their business. But I'm the victim of American democracy and the kind of fascism that we face. The other thing is, I've worked for 25 years at Catholic Charities. I like to brag that I was on probation 3 times there. I worked for Promise Ship and the Nebraska Family Collaborative. I was on probation there for being Black and challenging the racism in those inherent white controlled boards and system. And so it's not easy being raised. My mother and father were very much involved in helping us understand our identity. So again, people often ask me, do I come from Africa? Where am I from? Because I don't act like a lot of these handkerchief head bootlicking Negroes and people who are Malcolm called them so-called Negroes who were afraid of their shadows. And I also knew from an early age I had to study about that. And to go back to your question is, every now and then after retreat, I mean, one of the things I remember one of my previous directors says to me was, Jamal, from time to time, you need to take care of yourself and you need to have a mental health day because, again, as an African American living in the United States, it is torture. It's like a nightmare. And I'm quick to articulate that, not only when I was a scholar, as a teacher at the university and so on. And people like me are rare and they only come through wormholes so often. But the other thing I think that you have to do is you have the sense of bearing and patience because white folks are learning. And I had a colleague who said to me, Jamal, be respectful because some people are different journeys. And so I've developed some white allies, and I know sometimes they have to fall off the bandwagon. Again, it's like a recovering alcoholic. They go back to their whiteness. But at the end of the day, it is difficult to be Afrocentric in organizations that support your existence and don't acknowledge our enslavement, as if there's some people who don't acknowledge the Holocaust. The same thing. And we're doing that more so in Nebraska than ever before. But it's one of those issues we got to come with. And again, Karen, I think it's a great question. And we just need to do more of that dialogue in our society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You see, one thing that hit me, and one of the things I learned a long time ago, Karen, I'm gonna switch up on you and ask you a question is, I know that you deal with issues related to gender, and you are a white person who sees it from sometimes that female perspective. And I know one of the things my late wife used to say, you got to compare these analyses because they're very fascinating of gender and race. But my question is, what are the challenges you face in dealing with both dealing with some of the anti-racism training we dealt with, and also where have you got most of your knowledge about race issues during your lifetime? Because I just met you about 10 years ago when we're sitting next to each other talking about our atheism and comparing notes on that couch at somebody's Giles, I think it was her party at her house one night was there. So talk a bit more about you and how you deal with your female perspective as well as how do you acquire your astuteness about dealing with race issues.
So, in terms of learning about race issues, it's hard to be a human in the United States and not have a whole lot of lessons that you can draw from about race. If you're white like me and the tiniest bit observant and analytical, you can learn from your own mistakes, which is what I've done. And that's actually when, getting back to some of the trainings that you and I have done around cultural humility and other race trainings that we've done. One of the hardest lessons for me was that I really needed to humble myself and use my own stories as fodder, as examples for the other white people in the room to hear and to learn from, because you taught me that when folks are hearing my stories, as humiliating as they can be, it helps folks to realize that it's okay to honestly embrace our own racism, the mistakes that we've made, because that's the only way to actually learn is from your mistakes. So I think that I've learned how to be honest and blunt, and that it actually helps not just me to come to terms with my race, my racism, but also for the folks around us to be able to learn from that as well.
As you said that, one of the things that I use to people, like people say you're a recovering sinner. I said I'm a recovering sexist, or I'm a recovering homophobe. So in other words, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to grow, hopefully, if I can be confronted and challenged when I say something that's sexist or, patriarchal in a sense, or like some of these typical white guys I deal with every day in some of these circles, and even some of the things like. So it's a very important point I think that we need to deal with. And I like what you just shared there.
Mm-hmm. So, switching up on you a little bit, we've, done a lot of, participated in a lot of different kinds of activities and tried different strategies over the course of the evolution of MORE over the last 15 years, 20 years. And, I think about what are some of the suggestions we might have for folks who are just getting into the anti-racism journey right now. And so I'm curious, what are 3 suggestions that you have for the younger generation on how to be an anti-racist? And why are those your top suggestions?
I haven't taught at Nebraska Method College and also at Metro Community College and UNO Black Studies, as well as the School of Social Work. I've learned a lot from students, and one of the things I kind of partake or shared with them is that it's a constant journey. You don't give up, and it's almost like one of my Catholic friends told me, it becomes a deepening of your religion. The same thing with this. So I have 3 things. One is I think you got to read. I think the brainwashing crap they provide in school is garbage and junk, and it really doesn't depict the history of African Americans, Native Americans, and Asians and Latinos, people who have undergo baptism by fire by American racism and fashion. So you have to read, and oftentimes you don't have to read those books they give you. Read them, but use them as supplemental. But most of your education takes place outside of that. Conjunction with that, or in other words, in addition to that, is go to other parts of the community, interact with folks in those communities, get to know people. Be like Mr. Rogers. Can I be your friend today? Because again, I've learned a lot by being around Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, and only they could teach me in an informal manner. And you're gonna get that in the classroom, especially an overpriced place like UNO and those places that are pimping our communities, but offers nothing in that. The other thing I think we have to do is we have to basically, part of it, I think the third thing we have to do is we have to put ourselves in a situation where we are using the word cultural humility, where we literally ask questions. You got to, I think that's learn how to ask questions more than make statements. I cannot begin to tell you the number of experts. I even had a student once say to me one day about, oh, I know more about your culture, this than you. I'm like, are you serious? I have situations where someone may have more knowledge about certain subject areas, but in the sense of culturally, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to give birth from a woman. And the same thing being someone who lives in a nightmare like America. Nightmares, Malcolm X called the American dream here, in a sense for us. And then the last thing I think that relates to all this is I think to be able to push back. One of the things I was taught by my mother and my father, whenever you're in a room, ask a question, make a statement, let them know you're there. I cannot begin to tell you the number of people who sit in a room like a wildflower, stand on the sidelines, a bystander, as Rod Hindenburg talks about in issue dealing with Nazism and so on. But we got to get people to get away from the walls, challenge systems, and learn how to show that inquisitive mind. And those are the suggestions I would make for young people. But open your mouth and stop sitting around break dancing or watching TV all day and getting stupider and dumber than a rock.
Yeah, and getting back to your reading recommendation, I know that you've got a bunch of books that you recommend to folks. Have we ever put anything like that up on our website? a
Yes.
list of reading we do. It's
Well, I do one thing. I put my top 10 books, and one of the questions I ask people, even over the years, I would ask, what are the top 10 or top five books that you've read that have had an influence? And again, some people say they're religious books, whatever. But my point is, books that has you to recalibrate how you see the world. So there are 10, and sometimes the books move in and out, and I have, depending where I'm at. But yeah, that's a question. And I think each and every one of us have some books. Now, again, I know there's a lot of literate people with PhDs and law degrees who don't read anything. Again, I see them talk and act, and I even heard, I'm not going to front her off for the council, but one time she was quoted saying, I'm too busy to read books. Now, how do you say that as a president of the school board? Again, when you say things in public, young people listen to that. You should always, I'll make an excuse, you make up a lie today. I'm reading whatever, some fiction. But my point is, when our kids in our community don't get enough knowledge from systems, we have to sometimes encourage reading.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Well, now we know where to look for your book list.
So I'm gonna switch back, and we got this way of talking. We switch back and forth and say, well, we even say let's change up, which means I'm gonna be walking one way, meandering. Also, I got to change up because I suffer from attention deficit disorder. But one of the points that comes to Karen is that what would you give advice to mean white girls? I learned that term from Kim Havakati when I worked at Douglas County. Never heard of the word before, but she told me there's a case where you go into an office and there are a bunch of white girls who, she was white also, but she was saying they'd just be mean and negative. And for me, I see them as racist most of the time. But what would you do with these mean white girls who work in some of these nonprofits that we deal with to help them deepen their understanding of racism and also anti-racist subjects when, again, they operate as a clan? I mean, spelled with a C, not the K, but how would you deal with that?
Well, that's a good question. I'd say that, my own experience is that what I learned is that saying that I'm an anti-racist doesn't make me an anti-racist. So it's the doing of the thing that's actually the proof. So my sort of glib answer is stop your virtue signaling, poop or get off the pot, and at more.
Hold on, they might be constipated. Keep going. That's funny. I didn't think you could say that.
I was going to say, you and I have encountered so many of that virtue signaling type. And by that, I mean people who are all about saying, I'm an anti-racist, or, my organization's anti-racist, but there's no proof in the pudding. So the fact is that in Nebraska, the majority of nonprofits and many government agencies are run by nice white women. That's just the nature of these systems. And the kind of thing that we've encountered repeatedly is folks who are leading organizations basically telling us at more, we're so anti-racist. We're going to share this eye-opening data with you about racism in the foster care system or the education system or the juvenile justice system or the child welfare system. But then they never actually share the data. And I think a lot of it has to do with just being too scared that they're going to be tracked down, implemented as being the deep throat, revealing the secrets about their agencies. The other thing that we've encountered again and again is folks saying, we're so anti-racist, we're going to hire more. Do you want to come and help us conduct a study of potential racism among our nonprofit partners, and then we'll hire you to train these folks on how to be anti-racist. But when we say that sounds great, we like getting paid as much as the next guy, but what we really want out of this partnership isn't just to be paid to do this work for you. We want to make the findings of this research public, because we want to increase transparency and accountability in the sector. All of a sudden, they back off and say, oh, no, we've got to protect our partners. We can't do that. We can't do that. So that gets back to that glib answer that I had at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Enough with the virtue signaling, do the work.
I said, be about it. Don't talk about it, be about it. I hear you.
So one of the things that you and I have been talking a lot about one-on-one, just as, getting older, what it means just on a personal level to be going into our golden years. So one of the questions that I have for you is, what do you want your anti-racist legacy to be? Specifically, what parts of your work, your ideas, your approach do you hope are going to have a long-lasting impact beyond your life?
You know, I really appreciate Malcolm X the most, and I think he left a legacy, and he has the footnotes and things that breadcrumbs we can learn from. So one of the things I like to say is we have to have some written legacy as Black folks. I know people like Tommy Warren, Keith Station, and so on. I've never seen a letter from them in my life dealing with Black issues and so on. And some of them are in positions because they're Black. First Black police chief, you got the head of diversity making over six-figure incomes. Show me one sheet of paper that they've written related to the African American experience that protects or challenges rightness and racism. Again, I'm not calling out they're nice people on most days, I think, but how do you get in these jobs? So written legacy is one I would like to do. The other thing is a family man. I like to brag about all four of my kids are born in the institution of marriage, married for 43 years to the same woman. I'm not like the preacher with a girlfriend and a wife, but I think the morality and ethics are very important in our society. How you treat your family and so on. And I was raised in a family that was taught to help our brothers and sisters and people like that and other people. And so I think, how do you help your community? You can't help your community unless you first take care of yourself first. And that's a legacy that we leave. And then the last thing I think is we got to challenge systems. Again, I'm reminded of all of these Holocausts and genocidal things in Rwanda, Bosnia, enslavement, genocide against Native Americans. And what did they do? Some of those good Christians just sat on the sidelines. I know when I was at Catholic Charities, I saw myself as a missionary. I was trying to bring them to Christ because I remember one time Sister Adrian Baker was saying some very ungodly stuff. I told her to go and pray. She got mad at me and said, no, hold it. How you going to convert me, as Nietzsche says, when you don't practice your own religion? So I think at the end of the day, we have to make things as they are. And we also have to get over our thin skin and Negro fragility and white fragility, where we're afraid to talk about issues. But I have no need for the Equal Opportunity Commission. Abolish them. Get rid of the Human Relations Department in the city of Omaha. Abolish them. There's some Black people working there. They're not about our issues. So until we start to deal with demographics and data and challenge each other, why would you have a car that can't run? So I think the legacy is make sure we leave breadcrumbs, not just for our children and grandchildren, but as the African writer says, for those who are not yet born. And again, you look at these confused folks walking around here, I can't even be in the same room and smell sulfur with them. So the legacy is to make sure we try to make it so that our people don't have to carry all the burden that they do, because our ancestors, for the most part, allowed us to live and get to where we're at. And I think we have to give back by not sitting around collecting these big overpriced paychecks and getting our welfare checks behind these plexiglass offices. So the legacy is to leave some kind of written and verbal records for those generations that what we've fought, and so they have to reinvent the wheel.
I love that. Yeah, I was thinking about this question for myself too, and I think I totally agree about raising our kids to put anti-racism front and center in their own lives. But I also think about how do we, in the terms of the systems change piece, how do we, I work in public health. We're always talking about social determinants of health and
Right.
adverse childhood events, but those are really important issues. And we need to make the connection between ACEs and between social determinants of health and racism. And we need to be really explicit about it. And so that's what I've been trying to do in my work life, is really to make that clear connection and not beat around the bush when I'm doing trainings, when I'm preparing materials, when I'm talking to my colleagues.
By the way, Karen, we only have so much time, but I want to get to this question, the magic wand question particularly.
Yeah.
If you had a magic wand, and again, I like using that metaphor because I think it's very appropriate here. What would you do in terms of racial healing in our society? We got a very divided society. This Trumpism, crap, fascism, evilness that's going out of this administration is terrible. And my question basically is, what can we change to, again, pour more healing into this dysfunctional, crazy stuff we're seeing now?
I have to admit that when I think about what the reality is, I feel pretty downtrodden. And
You got the magic wand, so you
yeah,
got Genie in the bottle, you get the three
right.
wishes.
So with that magic wand, I think it's about encouraging relationships between people, and getting people talking. Uh, it feels, sometimes people say, well, what are you actually doing when you're having a conversation? You're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. But I actually am one of those anti-racists who believes that relationships actually lead to change in what people are doing. And so when we are able to talk across racial and ethnic boundaries, when we are able to get a better understanding of people from other countries and other cultures, when we understand how our own racism and ethnocentrism affects the people around us, and when we're open to learning about ourselves, that helps us to get to the point where we can actually make change happen in those systems that you were talking about, Jamal. How about you? If you had a magic wand for
I would,
racial healing?
I have three quick things I would say. Number one, make sure
Yeah.
every public institution that we pay taxes has integration diversity. So if our city is 35% people of color, you shouldn't have all white committees like the Criminal Justice Committee in Douglas County, where there's nobody black at the table or Hispanic or whatever. Make sure that the school board and school systems, they got all these little white committees that look like citizen councils from the South. So I would be number one is make sure that we monitor, make sure that there's just not one group or gender stuck up in these meetings planning for the rest of us. The second thing, I think we have to talk about reparations. You're not going to get healing in this country when you have the vast divides of 30% of the African Americans are poor, 10% white, you name it. But they're that way because of historical advantages that privileged white folks got, the Rockefellers, the Creighton University people who engaged in slavery through Georgetown, the Jesuits is what I'm talking about. So I think there needs to be some financial compensation for people who've been suffered the degradations of racism. And again, you look at these old boy networks, the police department, the fire department, they got there because they were passing exams back to each other for years and cheating and stuff. And then they get to shoot us and do that. So I would say reparations for that. And then the last thing I think we need to expose and talk about groups who are working in the corner and move beyond the Facebook stuff. And of course, move beyond the superficial stuff of sports and stuff that doesn't help us go forward. We're going to have a couple of events coming up. We've had Juneteenth. We're going to have Native Omaha Week. We had thousands of people show up for those events. But you have a book reading group like we did a couple of years ago on Malcolm X. We can't even get the people from the Malcolm X Foundation participate because they don't know how to read. Again, if I'm lying, take me to court because they don't know how to engage. And if you don't know how to read, how can you teach your child to read? We need to stop this silliness of back to school shaking kids' hands and stuff. So I just think basically if we're going to change things with a magic wand, we got to go front and center, confront the furry things that keep us in our oppressive, docile positions and stop people from taking these suck-up pills when they go inside the Omaha plantation schools.
I like your magic wand better than mine. We'll have to wave a bunch of them, see what happens. So do we have time for one more
Yeah,
question?
we're running over. Let's go to this last one. What do you want concretely to help promote Moore's mission, anti-racist healing, accountability, transparency, both with ourselves and other community agencies? I know a lot of agencies don't have strategic plans. Wayne Brown told me a couple of years ago the Urban League didn't have one. They're working on one now, but I would like to see make that public. But how do we get other educational institutions and individuals to actually promote these within their structure from your vantage point? And that also applies to us also.
So, getting back to the conversations piece. So, you were the original founder of Omaha Table Talk, and I got taken, it moved owners, quote unquote. But I think that one of the things that I've been talking about with you is how do we get back to having sponsoring as more some of those conversations, and we came up with this name, saying race, which if you say it fast is saying grace. And so I kind of felt like we could go under the radar of the folks who don't want to know about anybody talking about race and racism in the public domain. So I'd like to reignite a flame under those conversations over meals, sponsored by More, under the name of Saying Race. And I think that, I'm a strategic planner by training, so I love strategic planning. But I also want the actual doing. And I think, when you talked about systems change, that really resonates with me. I want to see what I call the nonprofit industrial complex in Omaha, where the small pool of funders and the small pool of fundees are consistently the same year after year. And there are some small changes, but I want to see big changes. And I think that requires some big thinking and big planning from movers and shakers in Omaha to really make that happen. So that's what I'd like to see.
By the way, we're like a couple of minutes over past the halfway mark, but I just want to throw 3 quick points out. Educational Rights Council deals with educational rights for kids. If I write to them, they won't respond. They have never done a community forum that I'm aware of. But it's a bunch of those mean white girls that we talked about who sit around with their tokens, and they don't help parents to become empowered and challenge their education. But again, they try to act as advocates, but again, they're self-serving, and they really ain't got no black people on their board. They got some artificial Negroes and people who ain't busted grape, and someone who's been in problem with the law with his bar exam and so on, all that bar stuff he deals with, embezzlement, whatever they do. But my point is that, and then the second thing is, we really have to, again, get in action in personal relationship conversations. I tell people I've been over 100 homes, nonprofits doing back in the day table talk, and for the most part, everybody was very respectful and nice. We learned a lot from each other, but we didn't have the baton to go to the next step. So part of this conversation is, how do we change just talking about it and doing it? And as the Reverend said, I'd rather see a sermon and hear one. So that's where we're at right now. So what I'm gonna do is switch over to the people who've been listening to us talk a little bit and let them fill in on it. And I know, again, I've interacted with some folks, and again, they won't bust a grape. And again, I can't hang with them after a while because they talk good, but don't deliver. So let me stop on that note, Karen, and let's open it up to the audience out here and see what you got to say and comment and even push back at us.
I see a question in the comments or in the chat.
Okay. Who is that? Do you want to go talk directly? I mean, I know we do chats here, but are you okay with opening up your mic and
Yeah, I think would you be willing to do that and talk about your mean girl question?
Sure. My name is Tamba Perry, and I work in maternal health in the community. And it wasn't a question per se, it was a comment. I don't think mean girl culture is necessarily open or in need of advice on how to do better, because they are essentially rewarded for maintaining the status quo. They keep getting funded. And so we can't tackle mean girl culture in the nonprofit sector without accountability. And as a person who left academia to work in community after I got my graduate, I think it's getting increasingly harder to work in the nonprofit sector, especially post-racial reckoning during the pandemic. And now with the Trump administration, it's getting increasingly harder to do like real work, good work that's actually going to impact the community in a meaningful and sustainable way. And regarding conversations, as a Black person, I focus on maternal health, maternal and child health at a system level. I am way past conversations, honestly. I'm really I've been in the what now era. I'm tired of being in meetings where we're talking about social determinants of health, which we've known for a very long time, but still keep pushing Band-Aid interventions that keep getting funded. And now with the funding crisis, I'm really afraid of where we're going and how things are going to look.
Right.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
This is a huge issue, and where we have been pushing back is with the funders. So when we when we get funded, so for example, White's Foundation is a big funder for us. We are and we're basically an unfunded organization. So, you know, we get like $10,000 a year in grants. Almost all of that is from whites, if not all. So we take that relationship as a partnership, not that they're funding us for our own good, but that we're helping them to progress as an anti-racist organization themselves. So when we write our grant proposals and when we have our grant meetings with them, we push that envelope with them. We talk about that. We say, you know, we want you to do this. We're liking this progress you've made in this one area, but we're going to challenge you on these other issues, and we want to see you grow. And so far, we have found that they are very receptive. So I think that's one way that we can actually try to influence the way that funding comes down from our small funding organizational pool in the Omaha area.
Now, I appreciate the comment, but one question I would say is, you mean there's no hope for the million white girls? I should have walked away from all the witches. I mean, I didn't say the bad word. I said witches, okay, who are attacking people who are at the bottom, particularly in social service. But the other point I would say to you is that I sat in a meeting one time where I was sitting there, and there was a medical from the University of Nebraska Medical Center, the Sparks meeting, Fabric Lab, and this woman came out. She was talking down to the black guy who was the ED, and I couldn't stand it. So finally, I had to make a comment because it was that paternalism, racism that these institutions provide. The second thing is, I think we also have to begin to look at the Douglas County Health Department. Again, all those factors and data they have, they said that racism is related to healthcare. But when you write to the director or the people in leadership, they're not busting a grape. Who's driving that anti-racism in healthcare for Douglas County, which is a public funded entity? So again, I just want to stop there because I want other people to comment. But again, how do we is there hope for some of our people? Well, you said that. Did you like dust your feet off and walk away and give up? And I think we convert some of those sinners. I mean, I'm trying my best to bring them to do what they say they do because they take my money every year through my taxes. Other comments, other feedback from the participants. I do not hear you. Are we talking a language that most people can't understand, Karen? I mean, are we ahead of time?
We have to be quiet.
Okay. Kind of like in a classroom, just quiet and let people talk.
Even I can't wait the full 45 seconds. You're supposed to ask folks to wait before they'll jump in and feel the discomfort of the silence.
So maybe that's a question we ask our participants. Can you point to something you've done anti-racism in the past year? 2, 1, whatever. And what would you say that is, regardless? Are people scared to talk? I know most people watch our programs a lot afterwards, YouTube, Facebook.
I'll bring up a point
Yes, go ahead.
if I can get it. Okay.
I hear you well.
I don't have to speak louder. Okay.
No, I hear you well. You're very clear, loud and clear.
I'm just trying to figure out at times how to grow the richness that I experienced in Heather McGee's book, The Sum of Us, SUM of Us. And I'm grateful that book came across my plate because I actually bought it and I attended 2 of the discussions with Ajmal at the public libraries. And I guess I always come back to her because to not have zero-sum thinking and move toward solidarity dividend, I think was the 2 points. It's just a whole change of the brain to move in that direction. And the world we live in right now is, I want to be on top, you can be on the bottom. I mean, it's the zero sum, and politically, how do we go against that kind of a thinking? And for me, it ties into the whole racism thing, mostly because Heather McGee pointed it out in each of her examples, whether it was health, education, housing, whatever else she talked over, 6 different topics. So I just wanted to bring forward that book, and I'm an educator, retired teacher, substitute once in a while, involved heavily in the Palestinian solidarity as well as the naturalization. I find that a positive thing. I just recently got involved in that again. So helping move people toward being citizens, and they are so eager to be learning about and entering that citizenship process. But then if they go through that process, they end up leaving it and maybe get picked up. So does that fit with the anti-racism? I think yes, because of the many different colors of people. And racism is not just colors, it's cultural, it's ethnic, that's all I can say right now. So I'll just end. Maybe you have
Thank
some
you.
comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pull me forward.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go back to the screen because everybody else is without visual. So I'm going to stay hidden too.
That's behind the veil. You know, one thing I like to share with people, when I was overseas in the Peace Corps, people showed me a lot of love. And so I feel real bad in this country when we treat international people, people who are refugees or who are trying to get asylees bad. And you got these so-called American citizens who will sit by and let them do what they're doing to people who may look different than them. I even know that these ICE people are trying to deport Native Americans. Are you serious? So I just think that we got to get people to stand up. And if they don't stand up, challenge them. Why are you in certain jobs if you're supposed to be protecting the most vulnerable? So again, we got to deal with that. Other feedback, other reactions. Did we say something?
I don't know. Can you?
Oh, go ahead.
We
I
can
don't
hear,
know if you can hear me, Ajam.
I hear you. I hear
It's
you well.
Shelley.
I hear you.
If I'm yelling, I apologize. I'm doing
Oh.
this from my phone, and I've never done it before, and I have on headphones, so I can't see you. I don't know if you can hear me.
I hear you well.
And I'm sitting in my garden gardening because I think the mean girls require sometimes that you go home and do physical things to help you sweat it out. I don't know a lot about mean girls in nonprofit. I've not worked in nonprofit, but I do know it exists in systems where I find it incredibly harmful for kids and families. And I think having worked in systems for many years, I've truly discovered that the answer is community being informed and being able to go places and speak out against what data there is to say, what are we doing about this? Because you're right, there are a series of meetings after meetings after meetings of discussions, not all of them great anymore. Some are redundant. We've been having the same ones for years and years. And so I think I've come to the conclusion that the real answer is in community, and community all being not necessarily on one page, because, obviously I heard everything you said, and, I don't probably agree with some of the things said about individual people. But coming together with the cause of what are we doing for our children, because the mean girl thing is real, and it needs to stop. And I think the only way it does is community bringing it back to the issue and forcing the system to move. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but in listening, I guess that's where I'm at in thinking of it.
yeah, it reminds me, Ajmal, we've had a number of listening sessions and town hall meetings to address various issues. So for example, bringing up our diversity report card from a few years ago, where we ranked and graded area nonprofits and social service agencies, especially including Omaha Public Schools, on the leadership diversity and racial and gender diversity, and how that compared to the populations that they were serving. And we presented that data, and it was tough for some of those organizations to hear. I remember Nebraska Families Collaborative did not like their grade, and really thought that we should be paying attention to the stuff that they were doing, and not to what we were seeing in the actual diversity data in terms of holding them accountable. Maybe there were some changes that were made later on down the line as a result of that meeting. I don't know, Ajmal. What do you think about bringing that data to the
Well,
the
you know,
publishers.
I think they did a good job producing the data themselves, but they didn't do nothing about it. That some of it's beyond their control. But basically, status quos are about getting money and enriching their pocketbooks. And one of the things I want to refer back to Shelley, and I think it's key when I work with Douglas County administration, it was hard to get data on some of these situations. But even if you got the data, what good is it if you never went to the community? And I can remember in my 3 years there, I only remember maybe a few times when they should have been going a lot more in the community, engaging those families because they didn't know how to do it and they didn't want to do it. And so again, you got a $20 million building sitting there. I mean, you got a building worth only 20 million, but they're spending $20,000 a month. And that's a travesty, a travesty. It's negative that they're doing that. So I just think at the end of the day, it is hard to work in an institution and carry that flag and then be in the community. And again, that's how you get on probation. And again, if you're living in an apartheid, negative, racist system and you ain't got some straps in your back from fighting back, you're part of that system. And I get to drop names because I know many of these illiterates are in these positions, sit around and play games all day. And how do you work in a job making $100,000 a year and you don't produce one report? Or when I call out the woman who works at the deputy chief police office, Sherry Thomas, and I say, "Where's your report?" She won't give it to me. I won't return the phone call. Or you go to the chief of police. When was the last time you seen him do a community forum without his handlers in North Omaha? We're killing people in our community and getting away with it. And we're going to sit here and say some silliness like, oh, well, you know, the system might be good. We can't drop names. Hey, when you get to be a certain age and you can't get sued because you tell them the truth, as Ernie would say, that's our reality. And we have a potential explosion going up in this community if we don't reverse this craziness in North Omaha as we've had many years ago. Again,
And you know, another thing I want to,
go ahead.
can
Go
I
ahead.
add too, because when I say that about community, you know, have my kids are grown, but it's also, I think, irresponsible to expect people to get off work, to go home, to make dinner, to do the
I agree.
homework, to do the baths, to do all the things and go to the community meeting. So I find that to be another issue. When my kids were young, I wouldn't have had time for any of it.
Right, but
Right. And so it's not necessarily their responsibility, but it's also about the being informed. And how do you do that so that regular people can be informed, but don't have to make it free work that they're doing?
I agree, and we need to reward people who come out who can do what they do. But remember, go back to the civil rights movement. There are people who've been doing stuff for years as volunteers. And one of the things I learned at Catholic Charities and St. Martin's is people always want to give back, even when they're poor. They want to challenge systems. And if the shoe pinches, you got to go after the caseworker or the dysfunctional person who's not doing their job. Because you and I both know there are a lot of people who are getting their pensions and stuff. They retire, and they have not done much of anything to help people. So again, I like when I was talking to the people at the library and I asked them for the data on use of the library, and one of the white women who I'm not going to mention her name, but she basically said something like, well, we don't want to stigmatize the North Omaha people in North Omaha Departure Branch because, you know, give me a break. It's not your call. Let us decide what we need for data. The same thing when I argue the same thing with STDs. Again, if we have worse conditions or whatever, at some point, when do we get that make that decision? And then those who don't want to do the heavy lifting, it was always going to be the few who do the work of the many. But I can't do work if you hide all the data that 9% of our kids are only math proficient in Omaha public schools. I would challenge the educational data and OPS if they made it available. But most times they won't make it available. Again, I've been fighting OPS for years. And when you got Scott Smithsborn and all these folks hiding data, they only give it to Willie Barney and their hand-picked Negro leaders or imported from plantation colleges in the South. You don't understand. I don't understand. I didn't grow up in those places. I grew up here. So my anger is righteous indignation that all you need to do, Shelley, is do reverse engineering. And at some point, if I help diagnose a disease and you don't want to get it cured, it's on you. So let our families make that decision where they want to go to work every day and then go out and try to help their kids. And some of us will protect their kids if they can't do it.
I'm also thinking, you know, a little bit about how, you know, we're of a certain age, and it feels like social media is the enemy. But I think that also social media is a way that people get information, share information, connect, and build movements in other generations. And so I have been trying to follow people who I feel like are the, you know, movers and shakers, Black women primarily, and really just, you know, amplify their voices as much as I can to try to help build some of those movements to account for some of what you talked about, Shelley, in terms of people not being able to get out, but we do have other ways to access information, to access connection, to do movement building.
I would add to that, when you don't have to have someone looking over your shoulder and you're not employed, you get to say all kinds of things. And again, truth hurts sometimes, but all I'm saying is we should not have the degradation in this community. We have so many millionaires and billionaires running around here. We shouldn't have people going without food at night. We shouldn't have people with poor education. We shouldn't. And we shouldn't have people who can't afford to go to school. So my point back to emphatically is that why is it that African Americans make a disproportionate number in the juvenile justice system, child welfare, and how many people of color work in those systems to help reverse it? Again, some of us need parenting skills. I know that. But some of us, we do everything right and we still can't get our kids back because the system makes money as cottage industry off our families and so on. Until you've gone in many of these people's families' homes and experienced poverty, like I did growing up in this community, you can't articulate the things that I do and say. And so again, as I say to folks, I joined the Peace Corps after I got my college degree to help other people. How many of these other folks have done anything to help anyone? And I get to drop their names because they ain't busted a grape for the people who down the street grew up with them, ate off the same plate. And if I'm pulling the leg or pulling their arms, it's about because I want them to do better because I know they can. I learned from people who push me back or tell me, oh, Jamal, you got that wrong. I stand corrected. But these clowns are sitting up there in their three-piece suits and London fogs and ain't busting a grape. Omaha should not have the poverty level and racism and even the crime level that we have and prison level if we were doing our share of the work. The few are doing the work of the many, and it's obvious. And we can't sustain this in this community and this society. Get rid of the Department of Education. They've never been in North Omaha. We don't need them. They've not done anything for us in Lincoln. Get rid of all of them. Again, it's a very strong statement, but at the end of the day, unless you can show how you're helping transform our community, what good is an airplane that doesn't fly?
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a good point, which is that you have to get into the affected communities that you're ostensibly helping in order to do the learning that's necessary to actually provide services or to do the kind of policy and practical changes that are necessary to change systems. And we found that again and again, getting back to the, the mean white girl meme, which is that the folks running those systems talk a good game and will not, they'll say, we'd love to have you, facilitate a conversation in North Omaha on our behalves. But then when push comes to shove, they will not get their butts there or pay for the work to be done. They just want it for free because we're anti-racist, so we're going to do this work for free.
And it reminded you, and I did training for the Department of Education, and there was only, I think, maybe one Black woman in there who didn't bust a grape. I think she pushed back against it. She might still be there. But they found it weird, some of the stuff we were just saying. You and I did some training for the law enforcement. And again, some of the stuff you said that was very basic, they got offended by it. There was just stuff that go on. But again, what good is the Department of Education if they've never set foot in North and South Omaha and talked to the very parents and their collaborators and instigators against the parents? Supporting the school system regime that is basically brainwashing the community to be passive and not challenge system. So again, a lot of nonprofits will check the box. And again, all due respect to Shelley and other people who work in systems. But at the end of the day, if we're not delivering and transforming systems, why are we in those positions? And should we as taxpayers ask for the elimination of certain positions and people in those jobs if they're not helping us or even talk to us? I don't know anybody who works for educational rights who come in our community. So my point, I'm just saying that some of us get to speak like that because I don't have nobody looking on my shoulder anymore. And again, they can't put me on probation. Social Security's not going to do that. And Trump, I hope he don't deport me to some place like Venezuela. But if he does, I hope my friends will, particularly my white allies and maybe Black friends, will bail me out or come and look for me. But we got some serious issues in our community. We're down to about the last 5 minutes or so, and I want to give somebody else a chance to stay before me and Karen close it out. Other feedback, and I really appreciate the feedback.
This is Maya.
Maya, appreciate it. I was wondering if you were going to speak. We only got a short time too.
No, I was listening, but I just wanted to ask both of you, since you've been doing this work for quite a while, uh, and I'm getting a little long in the tooth as well. So I just wanted to know what keeps you guys inspired to keep pushing and to keep doing the work that you do? How do you keep from getting too down or depressed when you keep seeing the same issues coming up again and again, and it looks like progress isn't being made, or right now in our whole country, it looks like we're kind of heading in the wrong direction. But yeah, basically inspires you guys to keep doing what you're doing?
I got three kids. I got a grandson and two
You've
granddaughters.
always got three of something to say.
Yeah, I got three. There's two girls and one boy, and I like seeing my grandkids' eyebrows grow. So that's one of the things that inspires me. The other thing I would say, in the back of my head, my mother's late, my wife is late, and they talk to me sometime. Like I said, I don't have a religious bone. I do believe in the ancestors and spirits in that sense, and that motivates me. And I also say there's some good friends out here that who've kind of helped me that make sense. That I could survive. And I'll give credit to Shelley. When I work with her in Douglas County and I sit in the room with people who just lie to you in your face and make up stuff, sometimes I say, Shelley, am I losing it? She says, no, they do that all the time. So you have people in different places that you can put your head on their shoulder, and you have to acknowledge the good they've done to help you on that journey. And I've had people like that. So that keeps me going. But at the end of the day, I know that there are people who have helped me to get to where I'm at, and I thank those ancestors. And as someone who will probably be moving soon to the ancestor world, as Clinton likes to say, President Clinton, I got more years behind me than in front of me. It motivates me not to give up because, again, I was struck with that thing that we have to help people. Even if we don't know them, we have to love them sometime unconditionally. And so people have done that for me, and I feel it's the need to stay in the struggle. As Ernie Chambers says, when Father Time catches me, I will be in motion. And that's what he said. And I kind of believe in the same thing. So Karen, your feedback.
Yeah, and as a white person, it's really easy to drop out of anti-racism work. I don't have to face it every day. And so I purposefully put a fire under my own butt by listening, reading, thinking, talking to, hanging out with folks who are going to help me keep that fire under my butt. And there's really nothing more motivating than people saying, we need you in this work. Your voice helps us, and if you drop out, you're just another white lady dropping out. That doesn't, maybe it's shame, maybe the fear of my own self-shaming. I don't know, but it works. And so that's what I do to motivate myself, in all honesty, is listen to people who don't have the luxury of being able to drop out.
We're at the end. Before we end, I want to make a couple of shameless plugs, and I appreciate you, Karen, and the audience here today. But we're going to have a conference in the fall, and also on July the 30th, we're going to invite a person, a white guy named Adam Fletcher Sass. The name of the book is called Omaha Black History, written by a white guy. Go get it. But this book jumped into my top 10 because it talks about all the Black American leaders, North Omaha, who did things that I didn't know anything about, doctors, lawyers, and folks. And I think this should be taught in Black studies in every classroom in a certain source who can read it and understand it. But Adam is from Canada, and he lived in North Omaha, and people showed him love. But what I find fascinating about this book, he actually looked at a lot of newspaper articles, and he documents some of the racism and some of the elitism, but also the people who fought back. And this made me feel proud to be from Omaha. I was born in Hastings, but grew up in Omaha. But this is a very motivating book, inspiring in terms of what we should be about. And again, we're going to promote this at that conference on October the 4th. And we're going to hopefully do a lot more of this discussion about our history and become proud about what Omaha is about, the churches, different places that he documents in his writing. So I would encourage people to join that, but also to read the book. The book is about $25, a little pricey for some people, but I think it's worth it. And I made some comments. Some people, if you don't like the book, I'll buy it back from you and sell it to somebody else. But it's a wonderful book. And I guess Adam does a great job of doing stuff that many African Americans not be able to do. I don't even think there's anybody in Black studies who've written anything on this level from a local perspective, because those of us who are from Omaha or from Nebraska, oftentimes people come in here and tell our stories. But what's fascinating is that we have our stories, we have our history. And so I like to see us continue these conversations, reading books, and challenge each other, and drop some names if you need to. Because again, if you're telling the truth, folks, as my mother used to say to me, you can continue to talking. And on that note, folks, I'd like to thank you for all participating. I know some of you were a little bit quiet. You can watch a rerun of this later on, and maybe an idea may come up and direct it towards Karen and myself, but also suggest to us other ways that we facilitate people doing what we did today. And like I said, I'm very grateful for the people who have allowed me over the years to lay my head on our shoulders. As Maya alluded to, sometimes you want to give up. But then when you look at those beautiful kids out there and you say, no, if I give up, who's going to be able to help do what we do with our skill set? So on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much. Thank Karen for being able to be very thought-provoking with me. As we always end, may the force be with you. Baroko.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.